Hello, and welcome to Anza Desert State Park's virtual ceremony of our bilingual interpretive panels dedicated to Cesar Chavez on this beautiful spring day. My name is Lennox, District Superintendent of the Colorado Desert District, which includes Anza Desert State Park. I'm happy to finally be able to do this virtual event after having to cancel it because of the pandemic last year. Today's event is being streamed live on our Anza Desert State Park and California State Park Facebook pages. This event is also being supported and co-hosted by the Anza Foundation, the California State Parks Sports Program, California State Parks Youth Connection, the Cesar Chavez Foundation, the Cesar Chavez National Monument, and Parks California. Additional funding and support was made possible by the Borrego Village Endowment Fund and the Borrego Springs Civic Foundation. Thank you to everybody who's made this day possible. I'd like to bring special attention to Dennis Stevens, the Colorado Desert District's Regional Interpretive Specialist, and the Borrego Springs High School students who helped us bring the Cesar Chavez story to life through these interpretive panels. In 1966, Cesar Chavez, prominent civil rights leader, labor and community organizer, visited Borrego Springs to support the local farm workers. Today, we'll be hearing from guest speakers, Ruben Andrade, the superintendent of the Cesar Chavez National Monument, Moses, Borrego Springs High School student, and Armando Quintero, Director of California State Parks. I'd like to thank Paul Chavez, son of Cesar Chavez, who sent us a pre-recorded inspirational message, which we posted to the Anza Desert State Park Facebook page earlier today. After hearing from our guest speakers, California State Park interpreter Lydia Stenson will be moderating a panel discussion with individuals who were present with Cesar Chavez in 1966. Our panelists will be Bill Chandler, Marcos Munoz, and Reverend Chris Hartmeyer. After our virtual ceremony, we'll be posting a pre-recorded interpretive tour of locations around Borrego Springs where some of these events occurred. The tour will be presented by the Borrego High School students from the Certified Interpretive Guide class. With that, please welcome Ruben Andrade, Superintendent of the Cesar Chavez National Monument.
Thank you, Ray. I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. Welcome to this Zoom meeting. I'd like to thank the staff at Anza Desert Park for putting this on and finding this untold story to share with us and with the citizenry of America. My name is Ruben Andrade. I am a son of a farm labor family. We grew up near Sacramento. I grew up in a little town by the name of Dixon. Fortunately, we weren't migrants. We lived right there in Dixon. I grew up and went to school from about 5th grade in 1968 all the way through high school. We used to live in Sacramento and moved to Dixon so that family wouldn't have to travel anymore back and forth. All my brothers had at one time worked in the fields. During junior high school, my brother Serapio came back from Vietnam and got a job at Kings Canyon Sequoia National Park. Lived right there in the park up in Lodgepole, which is up at the highest area just outside of the giant groves there. And he was a heavy equipment operator, drove heavy equipment and did all kinds of maintenance work. My father was a World War II veteran and he knew about national parks, but he just never had any ganas, any desire to actually go till our brother moved there. And then of course we spent a lot of time there. It's where I saw my first bear, where I chased the first deer I ever saw, and all kinds of other little critters. Just had a great time. During high school, I worked in the fields with my parents, played sports for the first 2 years, but then after that, it was more working in the fields so that I could help the family out. And working in the fields, I also met the girl that later became my wife and still is to this day. When I was in high school, we didn't have the programs that we had today, so we didn't have concurrent enrollment, which meant that you couldn't go to college while you were still in school. But I did graduate or finished my credits after my first semester of my senior year and went on to junior college in Sacramento. After that first semester of junior college, my dad said, "Mijo," he says, "you're pretty good with the books. You need to go to college, and we're not going to be able to afford it, but if you join the Army, they'll pay for it." So I did. I went off and was a soldier, lived in Germany during my military service. When I came back, I got a job and had my own apartment and was living good. Just what every young man would like, to have those kind of things, a job to spend money and a car to drive around, I guess. And my dad pulled me to the side one day. He says, "Mijo," he says, "when are you going to go to college?" I says, "Dad, maybe I'll take some night classes sometime." He says, "Mijo, you went to the Army so that you can go to college. You should probably start." Well, that June, my father died. So that next semester, I started college. I went to California State University in Sacramento. And of course, the family had always wanted me to do something that would bring in a good sized income. So I started studying business. That first year is just a weeding out year. It means that they're trying to see if you can make the grade so they actually let you in the School of Business. After my last final, I knew that I was in. I knew that I had done good all semester. I knew I had passed the final, and I left that classroom, which was a huge room, something I'd never been in so big. It looked like a stadium classroom, a few hundred kids in there. I walked out, going out to the parking lot. I looked at the American River, which went right there on the border of Sac State. And I looked, and I drove down to 7-Eleven, bought some bait and something to drink, and went back to the American River and started fishing. But I really wasn't fishing. I was contemplating what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I was realizing that, I wasn't going to go into business, academia, so that I could do something I really wanted. And I started thinking back, what is it I really wanted to do? And I remembered back to those days of my youth when I spent so much time in Sequoia with my brother and his family. And I remembered that back in those days, I thought to myself, this is something I'd like to do. I'd like to do something like Serapio does. So I went back to school the next semester, and there was actually a Department of Recreation and Leisure Studies. So I enrolled in that department. Both of my degrees, both my bachelor's and my master's, are in resource and visitor management. So I'm in the field that I actually studied. Well, so I started off on my dream to be a national park ranger. After a few years, we had our third child, and it came time that I needed to do some work. I needed to earn an income. We were getting pretty broke. So I dropped out. The wife and I talked, and we were going to drop out, and I was going to go back to school the next semester. Well, it wound up being about 10 years before I was able to continue towards reaching my dream. I became disabled, was able to go back to college, finished my bachelor's, and went straight into the master's program. And it was kind of hard getting into the Park Service, but I did take a job with the Bureau of Reclamation at Lake Berryessa. And then I was picked up as a permanent park ranger with the Army Corps of Engineers on the Kings River at Pine Flat Lake. Still kept applying for the Park Service, but just couldn't swing it. Finally, I started volunteering at Grants Grove in Kings Canyon National Park. And a few months later, the Park Service had somebody to reference me with in the Park Service. And I got my first NPS job at Lyndon Baines Johnson National Historic Park in Texas. About 2.5 years later, I transferred to New Mexico, Capulin Volcano National Park, where I was at a Chiefs conference. I went to a Chiefs conference in Rocky Mountains, the little town just outside of Rocky Mountains, Estes Park. And met a man that would become one of my mentors. He was looking in the room full of chief rangers, interpretive rangers, and he came up to me. His name was Bill Gwalt, and Bill came up to me and says, "Hey, Ruben, I've heard about you, but we've never met. And so why don't we go out to lunch?" So we went out, had a little lunch, and after we were finished eating, he says, "Ruben," he says, "what's your dream in the National Park Service?" I said, "Bill, do you mean my dreams or do you mean my goals and aspirations?" He says, "Well, I did say dreams, so do you have a dream?" I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "I'd like to be the first superintendent of Cesar Chavez National Park, whatever that might be." His jaw dropped. He says, "Ruben," he says, "that's not even on the NPS radar." He goes, "We might not even start talking about it for another 20 years. I said, "Well, Bill, you asked for a dream. That's a dream, and maybe I'll still be around in 20 years. In June of 2012, I guess they were having a meeting in Washington. The president wanted to establish this site. And they were talking about it, and they says, "So who are we going to install as the first superintendent?" At that point, I was the superintendent of Minuteman Missile National Historic Site, just outside of Badlands National Park in South Dakota. So my regional director said, who are we going to install there? And he said, "So has anybody asked Ruben?" That next week I get a call, and they asked me, he says, "Ruben," he says, do you still want to be the first superintendent at Cesar Chavez National Park site?" I says, "Well, yeah." He says, "Even if it's just a detail, a temporary appointment?" I said, "Well, it'd still be the first, wouldn't it?" And they said, "Yes." So here I am. I'm living the dream. So those are two dreams that I had just for my career. And there's others to, of course, always talk about. I think what I'd like to leave you with is that set dreams for yourself. Set dreams, no matter how impossible you think they might be, how nobody sees them on the horizon. I think if you aim your goals high, stick to your dreams, no matter how life diverts you from the path there. If you get there, it's such a great thing. I hope you all get to come out to visit us here at the park, and as well get out to Borrego Desert Park and see these new panels that have been installed. Thank you all for having me, and you have a beautiful day. Goodbye.
Thank you, Ruben. That was really inspiring. You worked in some really beautiful places, and to aspire and to want to be that first superintendent, that's amazing. Thank you, Ruben, for joining us. Between 2017 and 2018, more than 60 students from the Borrego Springs High School's digital, media, and history classes collaborated with project leaders at Borrego Desert State Park on these interpretive panels. It's my pleasure to introduce one of these Borrego Springs High School students, Moses. Moses, please join us.
Hi there, everybody. Good morning. My name is Moses Garcia. My involvement began when I was in 8th grade studying U.S. history with a focus on California and local history. At the time, my class was asked to do research on the Farm Workers Association movement. We worked in focus groups and discussed and decided what we were going to interpret, or what we thought was more important to interpret in the panels. My research, along with my peers, led us to great discussions along Cesar Chavez's movements and a further understanding of Cesar Chavez. With what we learned, we put into these panels, we put so much time and effort into these panels. My experience was great, and I enjoyed the time that it took us to work on these panels. With my deeper understanding of Cesar Chavez, it led me to understand that many people compared him to Martin Luther King, or they thought of him as a Latino version of Martin Luther King or Gandhi, using his words instead of physical actions, meaning no harm to other people, but still trying to get his point through and bringing the public into it and earning the public's love and interest in his movement. Personally, Cesar Chavez had a role in my life because my relatives, as well as my father, work in the fields here in Borrego Springs. And because of Cesar Chavez, they all have the rights that they have today. Being involved in this project gave me a deeper understanding of not only Cesar Chavez, but the Andrade Desert State Park and its important role in Cesar Chavez's time in Borrego Springs. I live in Borrego Springs, surrounded by all this park you see. Such a beautiful place and many places to explore. I did not know anything about this or anything about this land until I joined my certified interpretive host class, which helped us explore what you see behind me today. Perhaps even one day I might get a job as a certified interpretive host here in Borrego Springs and move back to my community. But overall, I enjoyed my involvement in this project, and I hope you all enjoyed the panel discussion as much as we did creating these panels. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Moses. That was excellent. You know, one of the I want to thank all of the Borrego High School students that participated in this. Some of the stories that I had heard was that when Cesar Chávez came into Borrego Springs, really it was kind of unknown. It's not really documented very well, and so for the students to work on that and just to bring that awareness not only to the students but also to the community, and then through these interpretive panels we'll be able to tell that story for future generations as well as our current visitors. So thank you, Borrego High School students. It's now my pleasure to introduce Armando Quintero, Director of California State Parks.
Good morning, and thank you so much, Ray. It's a real pleasure to be joining you all today. The site where we are gathering virtually today has been the home and the providence of humans for thousands of years. There were still Kumeyaay people living in that area, hunting and collecting seeds and plants in the same decade when my grandmother was born in the 1880s. When Juan Bautista de Anza entered this valley, the same valley 250 years ago, there were more than 500 tribal groups, 300 dialects, and 100 languages spoken among the independent nations across what we now call California. Our histories as humans have moved over time, from oral histories to written histories to multimedia storytelling. At Anza Borrego State Park, we have a story of action, of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Cesar Chavez and his colleagues came to this region in June 1966 to protect farm workers' rights. They camped at Borrego Palm Canyon Campground, after being turned away from a local community park. And despite pressure from local businessmen to evict them from the state park campground, Park Supervisor Wes Cater continued to allow them to stay at the campground, recognizing literally that parks are for everyone. Tienen todo el derecho de estar allí. Today's event on this holiday honoring Cesar Chavez is particularly powerful. Thank you to the event, or thanks to the efforts of 60 students from Borrego Springs High School and their partners in state parks. We now have 4 bilingual interpretive panels at Anza Borrego State Park. And these panels tell the story of how Cesar Chavez protected the rights of farm workers and how state parks reinforced its mission of providing park access to all people. Thank you so much, Moses, to you and your colleagues, the students. You are now a part of the story at Anza Borrego. And in joining you, Anza Borrego now becomes a part of all of our stories. The tradition of storytelling, of protecting places where more stories will appear, of people gathering, of celebrations and remembrances, and of reflection, this is the highest value of these parks. These are your parks. Gathering places in the Kumeyaay language is matayum. In Spanish, we might say, aquí nos juntamos. Gracias a todos que están participando en el evento de hoy. Thank you to all of you who are participating in today's event. And just one more mention, Paul, your father inspired us back in 1966, and he continues to inspire us today. It is an honor for state parks to commemorate him at Anza Borrego Desert State Park today and for future generations. And thank you to all of you who work so hard to tell the stories at Anza Borrego State Park. And I actually think right now might be a great time for Ray to unveil the interpretive panels so that we can all see them. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah. Yay.
We're just gonna, Ray, could you please unmute yourself? Thank you.
Here we are in the land of Zoom. It's funny, I think that in this Zoom environment that we're all living now, in some ways it actually has brought us closer together. I think it's actually done a wonderful job of revealing our humanity. So is Ray unmuted yet? He looks like he's still muted. Still can't hear Ray.
On?
Yeah, we can hear
we
you.
on? Okay, so now I'm finally unmuted. What live event without technical difficulties, right? I apologize for that. I think that the camera with the sun is acting a little funny right now. And so I want to thank everybody for joining us. Join us on Facebook, our guest speakers, and to everyone who worked on these panels. Please stay tuned for our next live event, where we'll be joined by individuals who were present during the Cesar Chavez in 1966 in a panel discussion. I had actually had the opportunity to hear a couple of the panelists a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week, and a lot of their messaging, a lot of the stuff that they were saying was really powerful and just really sunk in. And so I'm really looking forward to this event. And so with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us, and please log back into to the next panel discussion. Thank you and have a good day.